Dawsonville, Georgia. This is Holly, a Republican. Good morning.
Hey, guys. Good morning. So Jack has brought this up, and RFK touches on this quite a bit on the campaign trail, the idea of removing subsidies from the energy sector altogether and also holding them accountable, the entities accountable for pollution. So if those two things occurred, would Lori be for that or against that? And if so, why?
I would really be for oil and gas companies no longer receiving subsidies when they're making $400 billion in profits. They do not need it, right? They do not need another special handout after decades and decades and billions of dollars of handouts. I think one of the things that Jack said that I wanted to come back to is this is not just about free market enterprise. There is a big problem, the problem of our lifetime, as many say, and that requires big solutions. And that's what the Inflation Reduction Act is. It is landmark climate legislation, the biggest investment we have ever made as a country, one of the largest investments ever made in the world, to take the crisis as seriously as the science says we need to. Will it be enough? No, we have to do more because this problem is that big. One of the things that we haven't really talked about at all is the Heritage, where Jack works, put out a new paper or hundreds of papers focused on what will we do in 2025 if Republicans take back the presidency. And they want to eliminate everything, not just the tax credits that we are talking about. They also want to take away all of the protections and all of the standards that make sure that there are not pollutants being put into your water, that are being put into the air. And they even call, one of the writers even calls the extreme weather and the climate crisis mild and manageable. There is nothing mild and manageable about this crisis. It is why we need to act with boldness and as quickly as possible.
This is the Heritage 2025 Presidential Transition Project that you're referring to, correct?
Yes, Project 2025.
Jack Spencer, on that project.
Well, I can speak to the energy and environment piece of it because that's what I work on. I just need to correct Lori there a little bit. We're not advocating for pouring chemicals and pollutants into the water and air. No way, shape, or form. We are for getting rid of government energy subsidies, and we think that decisions on what sort of appliances Americans buy should be up to Americans, not to bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. We think that gives us a far more resilient energy economy, better prices, more predictability over time. Now, it is true that I would argue, I'll speak for myself here, I think it's reflected in that document, that a lot of the foundational environmental regulation that we continue to rely on today is outdated. Certainly the way it's applied is outdated. The best example, I would argue, is the 1975 Energy Policy and Conservation Act that lists out its justifications. None of those justifications remain true today. So, what we're talking about is rethinking these old statutes and coming up with something that works for today.
Is repealing the IRA part of that plan?
Certainly, we would argue that getting rid of most of the energy and environment subsidies.
Is there anything in the IRA that you would advocate in that plan keeping? Is there anything working from your perspective in the IRA?
The IRA is a massive piece of legislation. I don't know that there's anything that I'm a big fan of. Some of the things that I think are interesting, but I don't think it justifies the larger IRA. And I don't like the way it's subsidized. I don't like the way the subsidies are applied is on like nuclear energy. So I think nuclear provides a ton of potential, but I'm not for nuclear subsidies, for example. So some of the pro-nuclear stuff in recent pieces of legislation have been too subsidy oriented rather than trying to overcome technological challenges that would be broadly applicable, which would be more my approach.
To Vince.
So Jack, what I didn't hear you say is what you would do about climate change. If anything.
I wouldn't do anything. I would continue to look at it.
So you agree that that climate change is mild and manageable, and despite thousands of people's lives being impacted, hundreds of thousands of people's lives being impacted, half of the country has been impacted by an extreme
I don't know that we know that those things.
This
okay,
year.
if here's what I think. I think that we need to learn more about climate change. The climate is always changing. I'm not denying that there's, I'm not denying that there's.
This is climate denial.
Okay, that's offensive because you know precisely, where calling someone a climate denier comes from. That's a directly from Holocaust denier. It's offensive that you call people that. Now, moving on to the issue at hand, what I'm saying is that we should learn more about the climate. We should understand what human impact is, and we should understand what the policy implications thereof are before we transform our economy to the things that some are advocating.
Lori Lotus, quickly on a response there, and I do have more calls I need to get to.
I'm really honestly speechless. I look at what's happening across our country, what's happening in my own community when I can't send my 5-year-old son to camp because of smoke from wildfires in Canada, smoke that is affecting people in Atlanta. And the idea that we should do nothing is, to me, completely outlandish. Climate change is a kitchen table issue. And how out of touch Jack is with the American people, the majority of people in our country think that climate change has become a kitchen table issue. That includes the majority of Republicans. And I think what you're hearing is more denial of the facts and the reality that every American is dealing with in a rapidly changing world where climate change is getting worse. And we need to do more and not less. And that is what Jack is really pushing for us to do, is to do nothing about it.